Hi, thank you for joining me for this lesson on direct and indirect objects. This is a look at some critical sentence parts. We will review essential sentence parts, the subject and verb in this lesson, and then review parts of a complete statement. We'll then look at direct and indirect objects, and we'll end with some practice. All complete statements must have a verb and a subject and make sense. That should probably sound familiar to you by now. So in this example, Bobby ran to the store to buy a pencil. We have a subject and an action verb. But that's not enough. You have to make sure you have something in there that completes the statement for that verb and subject. So let's look at some examples where that's not enough. The following groups of words each have a subject and a verb but do not make complete statements. This one says, I want. Well, what do you want? This one says, we took. Well, what did you take? So another word called a complement is needed in each of the preceding examples. It will make the meaning of the words in the example complete. So we could say, I want rice. So what do you want? Rice. Now the meaning is complete. We took a bite. What did you take? A bite. And that complement now completes the meaning of the statement. So direct objects are a complement. A direct object is one kind of complement. A direct object always follows an action verb. Remember this, a direct object is a noun or pronoun that answers the question what or whom after an action verb. You need to know that. There are two main steps to finding the direct object. Step one is to find the subject and the action verb. I'm not going to go over this step because it's outside the scope of this particular lesson, but if you don't know how to find the subject and or verb of a sentence, you need to let me know and I'll be happy to help you with that. Step two is then to ask yourself what or whom after an action verb. So let's look at these steps in action. Here's our sentence. We studied Japan in my geography class. So step one is to identify our subject and verb, which we have right here. And then step two is to ask yourself what or whom after an action verb. So our verb is studied. So we say, we studied what? And in this case, the answer is Japan. So Japan is your direct object. So this sentence then says, we studied Japan in my geography class. So you have your subject, your verb, and your direct object. One hint is to eliminate prepositional phrases in your sentences. If you can get rid of those, it's much easier to then narrow down onto your subject and your action, verb, and your direct or indirect object. I'm not going to go over prepositional phrases. You can look it up or ask me if you don't already know what it is, but just as a reminder, prepositional phrases begin with a preposition word and end in a noun. And if you see that in a sentence, you can get rid of it. Once you've crossed that out, you have much less language that you have to deal with when you need to identify your subject and your verb and your objects. Okay? So let's look at another example. Remember, two steps. Find the subject and the action verb, then ask yourself what or whom after the action verb. So in this sentence, we have, I really enjoyed the chapter. So step one, find your subject, which is I. Find your verb, which is enjoyed. Step two, ask who or what after the verb. So this one is, I enjoyed what? And the answer is chapter. So chapter is our direct object. You try it. Identify the subject, verb, and direct object in the following sentence. Pause your screen if you need some time. I'm going to go ahead and share the answer, assuming that you've paused your screen and read and thought about this sentence. So video is our subject, showed is our verb, and I know this because I can find my verb, which is showed, and then I can ask who or what showed Japanese farmers at work. The answer is video, which makes it my subject. Then I can ask, the video showed what? And in this case, it showed farmers, so that is our direct object. So finding a direct object in a question is pretty much the same process, but first you need to change the question to a statement. So in this particular example here, it says, have you read that book about Japanese culture? So you'll want to take that question and change it into a statement. So in this case, the statement is, you have read that book about Japanese culture. Now that I've changed the question to a statement, I can apply my steps of identifying the verb, the subject, then asking what after the verb, and coming up with my direct object. You can also have compound direct objects. So you can have more than one direct object in a sentence. Two or more direct objects following the same verb are called a compound direct object. So in this example, we have people in Japan eat fish and rice. Our verb is eat. We ask who or what eat fish and rice. The answer is people, which is then our subject. And then we ask, what do they eat? And the answer is fish and rice. So we have two direct objects in this particular example. I also have a prepositional phrase which I could have gotten rid of before I started to analyze the sentence to help me out. All right, let's look at indirect objects. So many action verbs have a direct object, but some action verbs also have a second complement to complete the meaning of the sentence, and that's called an indirect object. An indirect object is a noun or a pronoun that answers the question to or for whom or to or for what after the action verb. So you're going to see there are 3 steps to this, but the first 2 steps are the same. You've already dealt with these when you were identifying direct objects. So step 1 is the same, find the subject and the action verb. Step 2 is then to find the direct object by asking yourself what or whom after an action verb. Now what's different for indirect objects is that you have a 3rd step in which you ask yourself to whom, for whom, or to what or for what after an action verb. So let's put this together and see if it makes more sense. Here's our sentence. We gave the new student a tour of the school. So first we look for our verb. In this case, it's gave. To find our subject, we ask who or what gave the new student a tour of the school. In this case, the answer is we, so that's our subject. We then do step 2, which is to find a direct object by asking ourselves what or whom after the verb. So here's our verb. So we gave whom a tour of the school. I'm sorry, let me backtrack. We ask what or whom after the verb. So we gave what? In this case, we gave a tour of the school. So that's our direct object. And whom did we give that tour to? That's our indirect object. So step 3 was to ask yourself to whom after the verb. So there's our verb. We identified the what to get our direct object. Then we asked whom for that direct object, and we got the answer of student. So we gave what, which is a tour. We gave a tour to whom, which is student. And student, therefore, is our indirect object. Let's do another one. Step 1, again, is to find the subject and the action verb. So our sentence is, Marissa bought Fernando a pencil. So bought is our verb. Who or what bought Fernando a pencil? The answer is Marissa, so that makes it the subject, makes her the subject. Then we ask, Marissa bought what? And in this case, the what is a pencil, so that's our direct object. And then we say, Marissa bought a pencil for whom, which is step 3, and the answer is Fernando, our indirect object. So Marissa bought what? That's our direct object, which is pencil. And then Marissa bought a pencil for whom, which is Fernando, our indirect object. So finding an indirect object in a question. To find an indirect object in a question, change the question into a statement. So it's just like we did for direct objects. Here we have a question. Has the principal given him a student handbook? You'll take that sentence and change it, or that question, and change it into a statement. The principal has given him a student handbook. Now that we have it written in a statement form, we can apply our 3 steps. First, look for your verb, which is has given. Then ask who or what has given him a student handbook. The answer is principal, so that's how we know what our subject is. Then we ask, the principal has given what? In this case, we have a handbook. And whom was that handbook given to? In this case, it's a student. So our direct object is handbook and our indirect object is student. All right, here's some practice for you. There are 5 sentences on the screen, and they may or may not all have indirect objects and direct objects in them. What I would like you to do is pause your screen and take a few moments to work on these sentences. When you have your answers, unpause the recording and follow along with me to compare your answers. So I'm assuming that you've taken some time to do the work on these sentences. Now go ahead and compare your answers to mine. If you have anything on your answers that does not match mine and you're still confused as to why, please do K-mail me and I would be happy to go over it with you. I hope this presentation has helped, and I look forward to any questions, comments, and concerns that you want to send me via K-mail or on Skype. Just to recap, we went over the essential sentence parts of subject and verb. We reviewed parts of a complete statement. We looked at direct and indirect objects, and then we closed off with a little practice. Thank you so much and have a great one.